Hey folks, my name's Shane. Amateur radio call sign KD9NJJ on this little YouTube channel called Scout 75. For a while, I've been kicking around the idea of doing a live stream like this because they're always fun to do, interact with people, but never had a real good idea to do it that's a little bit different from everybody else. But we kind of came up with one. What we're going to do is kind of go through some items or ideas or topics that would be good for people who are more into emergency comms, the prepper type people, especially those that are just getting into ham radio or are still on the outside looking in, considering to get into ham radio. Why don't we just hop right in and talk about this live stream topic, which is the Shack in the Box radio. That's very popular with people who are in the preparedness mindset. The logic is one radio that does it all, right? It's a pretty appealing thing. So let's go off with that, kind of the definition, and I have that in parentheses for a reason because I'm making this topic up as I go along, or the definition. So a ham radio, Shack in the Box, in my eyes, is a ham radio that is all band and all mode, right? So what do you mean by that? It has all the common bands, HF bands, VHF, UHF, and it can handle all the modes. Your voice modes like single sideband, FM, AM, and then CW for Morse code, and then digital modes like FL Digi, FT8 call. Not necessarily all the bands. You hear some people complain that some don't have the right particular bands, but it has all the useful ones. 2 meters, 70 sims for VHF, UHF, HF. You got to have the 20 and the 40. If it doesn't have 160, it's no big deal, right? So that's kind of the key. Is the most common is the most useful because that's where the people are going to be. It doesn't do you a lot of good to have 160 if you don't have enough wire to put up for that or nobody's on that. But with the Shack in the Box concept, there's some pros. Obviously, it's just one radio instead of multiple ones. Do you need to go any further than that, right? It has one manual of arms to learn, one set of knobs, one set of buttons, one menu to dive through and get to know. So it's, you're not doing a different menu system between a different thing. It's efficient use of space. So having multiple radios on your ham shack or in a vehicle, on a picnic table or what have you, it's just one box, less wires, one power cable, one mat. It just makes things a little bit easier to manage. But the cons are, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's one radio instead of multiples. They really become a jack of all trades and a master of none. And one way to look at that, the one base unit that's still around that is Shack in the Box, which would be the Yaesu 891. That is about the same size as any other base radio that's HF only, like a ICOM 7300 or some of the newer models. But yet it has VHF and UHF functions in there. So in order to get that much stuff into that same spot in space, you have to make some sacrifices. So I personally have the 891. It's a great radio, but it's not as great as it can be on HF as other radios, like I said, comparably the ICOM 7300. It doesn't have the filtering. It doesn't have everything as good as it can be. Sacrifices were made in order to fit as much as you can in that small of a space and keep it cost effective. So that's one thing to definitely remember. You're making sacrifices, and that goes the same thing with the VHF UHF side of things. And that's the biggest downside I've had with the Shack in Box radios that I have experience with, is that they do not have a dual receive. Like a lot of your VHF UHF radios, you can have an A band and B band that can have different frequencies on, and you can receive at the same time. That was a downside for me when I went with this 891. I had the imagination that I could have it on my desk and I could be listening or checking into the local 2 meter net And while I'm waiting for my turn, I can be scrolling around on HF and hunting parks on the air and summits on the air and that type of thing, but it doesn't have that capability. Another thing to keep in mind is that this full-size radios, the Shack in the Box, are kind of a power hog. Even the smaller ones that are QRO, like the old 857 and the ICOM 706, they draw a lot of amps when you're just listening, even on 2 meters. Sam's pointing out that there are some, the TS2000 is a dual receive. I'm not familiar with that radio, but I got a feeling it's a little more expensive. And then my last con really is when you get to the QRP size radios, like the ASU 817, 818 family, or the ICOM 705, when you're down to 5 or 6 watts, or even 10 watts with an external battery, on VHF and UHF, you don't have any advantage over a handheld. So at that point, it kind of becomes, what's the point? So that's where I kind of stand on this. I see some advantages and there's some disadvantages, and you just gotta find where you want to be. Where it comes to the full size ones, like the 890 or the 991 from Yaesu, honestly, I probably would not buy this radio again that I have. I like it a lot, but as I said, for the space it takes up, I could have a standalone HF rig from Kenwood, Yaesu, ICOM, or others that does everything a lot better. And even to this day, I have a FTM 300 sitting next to it. That's my primary rig for VHF and UHF. So this Shack in the Box that I bought has been basically an HF only rig. Now, where I do see them as more of an advantage is the mobile size ones, like the old ICOM 706 or 857, which unfortunately aren't in market anymore. That I like, being for a mobile setup. If you're in a vehicle, chances are you're driving down the road, you're only going to be doing one at a time. Or if you're doing some type of emergency event, storm watch or whatever, again, you're using one at a time, but it's a good sacrifice there. Yeah, great point, Paul. The 891 is also older technology, and and that's where I'm going to wrap things up too. Good segue. With the QRP rigs, again, I have the 705, I have the 818. I love those rigs, but I don't primarily, I just use them for HF. When I'm out backpacking or mobile, I typically have a handheld that's more convenient for VHF and UHF. Now, newer technology is coming out. The 705, like I mentioned, is miles above everything else that I have experience with digital modes and all that stuff. And Yaesu is coming back into that market again with a competitor for QRP. One would kind of hope that possibly they will have a modernized version of the 857 or the 706, and it would be probably more of the same shape as the 705, more of a brick shape with a large display and everything. And with a little luck, they will be dual receive, and with GPS, so you can do things like APRS, D-Star, System Fusion, all those things. But my guess is with all that stuff, it's going to be extremely expensive radio. I guess that'll be about $2,000. So that will be a downside. So right now, depending on the size, I think the Shack in the Box is great for some, not so great for others. Again, if dual receive is not critical for you, you may really have good luck with the 991A. But other than that, it's kind of where it's at with me. And now I'll bring in the boys. What do you think? But Greg, you're not a stranger to the Shack in the Box concept either. I know you got the 706, which is a fantastic rig.
Yeah, I got the 706, fully loaded, whatever, Mark II, blah, blah, blah. and it's fantastic radio, Mars mod. That way I could do 100 watts on 11 meters if I want to. You just open it up, but it's fantastic radio, uh, great size.
Mm-hmm.
The only difference is there's no built-in battery, so you're packing around external battery.
Yeah.
Which with batteries these days, it's not a big deal. It's not much weight anymore, so
No.
I think that's fantastic, and I wish they would just update that radio and make it the same.
Oh, I agree. I would love to see a modernized 706 come out. Again, like the same format as the 705, have D Star on it and everything. That'd be fantastic. Now, do you one point with the external battery, far as for the portable use and emergency uses, I like the external battery because typically two is one and one is none. And like me, I'll carry a main battery and a smaller one, and if the main battery goes dead, if I'm not doing good battery management, you can quickly switch it out. Where if you get just the internal battery and you get kind of reliant on that, you don't have something with, you could be lights out there if you're not careful with your battery.
Yeah.
So,
It's just what you're wanting to do. Like you said, you were talking about the 705. Fantastic radio, right?
yep,
Um, Perfect, I think, for um, not maybe not as your normal shack in the box for emergency communications if you're trying to reach out there, but with the low watts and stuff, it still has a fantastic receive that blows most radios away with it.
yep.
And so if you're just listening or talking local to like a mag group or something like that, I think that's a great radio for that use.
Oh, absolutely.
Greg, you just used a term that people new in the hobby may not know. Mag group.
Oh, mutual assist mutual assistant group, just local friends that you have to
Yeah.
communicate with
Mhm.
for whatever's going on. So maybe it's just something to check out. If you have if if you're in a situation where weather happens, or if it's just to communicate and stay connected.
Yep.
It's just something local, so really close. So if you're using your 5 watts or whatever to somewhere in a regional area, that's plenty.
Like I said, this whole live stream is going to be more geared towards the prepper type and the emergency comms, and you kind of hit on a thing that's key for me that I always try to preach as when you talk about May group and stuff like that is to the biggest thing that a lot of people who get into prepping, they'll get into the gear, right? They want to buy the cool guy stuff and everything, but one of the biggest preps that a person can do is not having gear, not having food and water stored up, but networking with people, getting to know your neighbors, making sure your friends and family are taken care of, and reaching out to others who may be like minded with you and stuff like that. And that is key. And I think it's also key to get people into this hobby too. Is you know, as you say, Greg, you're trying to help people out in your area if there's some type of event or emergency to be able to communicate, and a lot of them aren't into radio yet. You being that ambassador of the hobby, saying, hey, this is my 706, this is what I can do. Not only you get that interest, but you build the community. And at first, in this mag group that you described, chances are you're just going to be the radio guy, and everybody's like, I don't need to have a radio, I'll just go to Greg. But over time, you can be that influence to get more people to get familiar with amateur radio and get their tech license at least. Or if they say, I don't want to bother with this, you can at least get them into FRS or something like that and help them out be more useful.